Hello, I'm Amy Zawi with the Jerusalem Connection Red Alert Report for Wednesday, January 13. Why is truth in the media a matter of life and death? In our current climate, we are all frustrated on every side with the lack of truth being espoused. Even what was once trusted media outlets are now deserved suspects of our distrust. Freedom of speech, as defined in America, is turning into freedom of speech that some bureaucrat or billionaire decides is acceptable. Some of those from big tech and sometimes within the government. The problem is that this back and forth of political bickering and the disingenuous news reporting can and will lead to innocent people dying. Well, I can likely find many examples of this across the topic spectrum. You may be thinking that I'm going to highlight an example from the events of January 6th in the United States. But I'm going to take this time to focus on an example from an antisemitic vantage point. As reported by Palestinian Media Watch and other outlets, terrorist Kamal Abdul Wa'ir was serving a 6-life sentence prison term in an Israeli prison for his involvement with the murder of 4 Israelis. He died in prison from his battle with cancer. Already during his illness, the PA, Palestinian Authority, and Fatah and their media outlets and social media arms launched an incitement campaign citing top officials who claimed Israel was denying Kamal proper treatment and that when he died, they intensified the libel, saying that his death was caused by deliberate medical neglect. Apparently, believing this to be true, terrorist Muhammad Kabha decided to kill an Israeli in revenge when he, quote, identified a Jewish woman walking alone. He then took a rock and bludgeoned her to death. You may or may not have seen this story late in December, where an Israeli mother of 6 was murdered in cold blood simply for being Jewish and walking down the street. The Palestinian terrorist who brutally murdered Esther Horgan, this mom of 6, told Israeli interrogators that he, quote, decided to carry out a terrorist attack after he was influenced by the death of the security prisoner Kamal, and who died in prison resulting from his cancer. He thus believed it was a deliberate medical neglect murder. Israeli security government press office actually posted that quote. Please keep in mind that while the PA and Fatah media will continually market the premise that Israeli prison is some sort of draconian dungeon with Hitler-like tendencies to torture and experiment on prisoners, this is not the case. Please know that the International Red Cross regularly visits Palestinian terrorist prisoners to check on their condition and treatment, and Israel has never been accused of treating sick terrorists at all improperly. In June 2020, a Red Cross official told the PA on PA-TV that they had visited more than 90% of Palestinian prisoners and saw no evidence of neglect or abuse. Not only does the Red Cross monitor these conditions, so does the U.S. A quote from the U.S. Department, "The law provides prisoners and detainees the right to conditions that do not harm health or dignity. Conditions in permanent detention facilities run by Israeli Prison Service, IPS, generally met these international standards." Now, this was the result, a quote from the International Commission of the Red Cross, and then the U.S. Department of State, Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor, their report on human rights practices in Israel and the occupied territories. They actually also reiterated that quote, verifying the conditions. In addition, Israeli media reported that the Palestinian terrorist prisoners were in fact receiving all their medication for free, and that many of these medications are not even part of the medical service insurance coverage that Israeli citizens have, meaning Israeli citizens have access to those medications, but they have to pay for them, and of course the prisoners get them for free as needed. Other prisoners who have died of other conditions, such as cancer, are always publicized as having died from medical neglect via the PA and Fatah outlets. Thus, the narrative is that if a person in prison for life dies, it must have somehow been the fault of the Israelis. The PA and Fatah outlets have been for years beating their media outlet drum that Israel's incarceration of convicted murderers and terrorists who die in custody are then their deaths are resulting from Israel's malevolent actions. This, of course, is not true, but their media pounds this message and the people are then swayed to believe the lie. And as a result, another family is left without a mother and a wife. Another innocent victim, Esther, whose light is extinguished because of a faulty narrative to prop up a nefarious agenda. That agenda is anti-Semitism. Now, be on the lookout for news and media sources who repeat a lie over and over again that you would believe it. Find the truth and declare it as loud and as clearly wherever you can. Shavua Tov, and have a great week.